Well, there we go. And here we are. All right. If you're anything like me, and I know I am, welcome. I'm happy to be here. Guess what this week we're talking about? Well, we're talking about triangles. Kind of an odd title for this weekly series, but if you took part in Monday's Monster Monday, you'd understand what the triangles are about. It's basically us talking about uh, the using a very simple technique and coming out with some pretty complex results thereof. Now, for those who don't know, the this channel is dedicated to deep diving down some strange pathways, sticking our heads down some rabbit holes, and having some fun. So, guys, you can participate live 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on this channel on YouTube, or if you prefer a Discord server, you can do that. First, join a Discord server. Second, search for Fantasy Grounds College. Join them. Hey, what's up, Infinite? What's up, everybody? Soylent Green. Come on, seriously, it's made out of people. Even the second generation version, which the taste wasn't as good, still made out of people. Yeah, they haven't gotten past that point. So you could join Fantasy Grounds College Discord, where you can hang out with some of the classmates and collegiates over there. But then you want to hang out with the cool people, and so we're down in the boiler room. So on the left, slide all the way down, go down to the DBJ voice channel right there in the boiler room, and that's where you can participate there. Especially if you're someone who doesn't want to limit the number of characters you can type in. Plus, you could post up photographs and links. Of course, please abide by Fantasy Grounds College posting rule set, please. Zev says, "What is the theme?" was away because Mom almost got taken to the hospital. Oh, well, don't. Oh, she's fine. Okay, don't surprise me like that, Zev. This week today's theme and the rest of this week, of course, we're talking about triangles. We're setting up situations where the most basic shape. Okay, thank you. The most basic shape in the in stable shape, from what I understand, is a triangle. And for tabletop role-playing games, we are building not with physical materials, but we are building with our imagination. And a 3-point connection, whether it is physical, social, explorative, psychological, many times even descriptive, is, for me, is a best practice. So I thought I would talk about that this week. So today, Discord Tuesday, it's kind of a catch-all. I try to include some mechanics. So let's get into some triangular mechanical effects. Now, follow me on this because while I am not a person who talks much about like character builds or specific mechanics in general, I do want to talk about to kind of break apart or analyze the mechanics that we use at the game, not from a specific game system, but how we use those mechanics. So, okay, and this was brought up before, so I'm sure you'll be able to follow me on this. All right. So imagine this: 2-player characters are sitting at a table, and suddenly a door bursts in. They're having dinner, or they're at a tavern, or whatever the case might be, and bad guys break into the room. So you go, you know what? This is getting a little boring. I'm going to have someone break into the room and start firing guns. Now, I'm going to segue here a little bit. I'm going to get a little squirreled here. The only us. For those who don't know, I am surrounded by a family of people who are quite intelligent, and we had a little discussion about it segued into science and Isaac Arthur and molecular distances and such. And in the Discord, Tesla's talking to Dead Man about the diameter of atom ranges. Now, for your layman, that kind of conversation is like, what? Like, what's the point of that? But amongst us, I love it. I love it so much. And it's sometimes it's like the tiny things, it's the little things that can be for me can be developed into something that is very, very powerful. Zev says the funny thing in Destiny 2, somebody's a Destiny 2 fan. Yep. The dark is represented by a pyramid, a triangular prism, which is the easiest shape, while the light, the traveler, the good God that gave us our power, is seen as a sphere. Spheres are also a very I love that. Unfortunately, I am. Unfortunately, that's like the person. It's like us apologizing for like really terrible movies. Like I love. I'm a huge fan of. You guys always know I always talk about movies, and I'm a big fan of movies like Jumper and I don't know. It doesn't matter. The point is that they're terrible movies that I'm like, yeah, I kind of like that movie. If for no other reason than some of the concepts in some of them, but in let's get into some mechanics. So you got two people sitting down, your player characters are there, you want to break up the uh you want to break up the tension. And yeah, I agree with you, Zev. Zev says spheres, I believe, are the most complex shape as it's one side. I also believe it's a very natural shape as well for things, especially in a non-gravitational location, that spheres are a very common shape as well. So the PCs want to take, say, a move action. In most role-playing games, you have some ability to move. You take your move action, you have a particular amount of distance, whether it's measured in inches or spaces or areas or zones or what have you. And you have one player character that wants to go from A to B. So both player characters are on opposite sides of the table, and you claim that it's going to take some movement to go around the table. So one player says, well, I'm going to get up out my seat, walk around the table, and face the bad guys. And yeah, Deadman says fire in zero gravity is a sphere. And if I'm not mistaken, fire is not fed as greatly in the spherical shape of fire as opposed to the gravitational effect of fire on Earth, because fire feeds from oxygen from below and then burns off going upwards, whereas as a sphere, it would have to feed from the interior outwards. Yes, which is a pretty common thing. Now, of course, in space stations, you have oxygen and air movement and things like that. So fire probably would spread rather oddly in space, and I'm sure no one wants to test that out. Yep, Tesla says no gravity, so no convection, so no new oxygen. Yes, you would probably have to have a pretty severe amount of like air movement or something, like a wind tunnel kind of effect to blow so that the fire flows in one direction and the air and oxygen's coming in from another direction, which would kind of tell you that a fire would be put out in a vacuum. I mean, not vacuum, sorry, zero gravity, but yeah, I'm not testing that out. And then Pelora goes on to say it's the largest volume to area shape, most power in the smallest space for a sphere. Now, I'm sure you guys are like I said, the people that surround me make me look far more brilliant than I really am. Uh, yeah, math, exactly. We are going next. We'll be going into the Pythagorean theorem and measuring lengths of triangles and stuff. I was thinking the same thing. Zeb. I feel like I'm back in trig. Yeah, don't remind me. Oh man. Yeah, don't. Anyway, so player character leaves behind table, walks around table. Uh, I'm with you there, Zev. I'm an old head nerd. Not too bright on that fact either. And so you get another player character. Oh, you guys are squirreling me. You get another player character wants to go across the table. So player character says, well, I'm going to flip across the table and confront the bad guys. Yeah, I know you guys talk about geometry, trig. Well, then be getting into cosines and sine waves and all that kind of stuff. It's like, stop it! This isn't extra credit. So you sometimes what we like to do. Oh, my voice just left me. Sometimes what we like to do when it comes to mechanics is that instead of taking a direct path from A to B, sometimes we will divert our attention away from, like you guys are diverting attention away from triangles to spheres. Although actually spheres doesn't have to do with it. Anyway, sometimes we'll say, okay, you want to do a flip across the table. I'm going to need you to make an acrobatics check or an athletics check or whatever the skill may be in the game that you're using. And I made the contention previous, and we're going to talk about it today, is that what ends up happening is that the player character who decides not to engage in the cinematic may not want to have that, take their movement action and move around the table. The character who decides to do the really cool, I'm going to jump over the table, maybe, shoulder roll over the table, draw my weapons out and face whatever bad guy just burst through the door, is expected to make a die roll. Now that die roll now diverges from a straight line, A to B, A, I'm moving, B, I'm going to face the bad guys, to making a triangular distance to get to where they want to go. They have to get to the skill roll, which is not a physical location, but it is a divergent from a mechanic to a secondary mechanic, die roll, skill check, ability check, whatever the case may be, overcoming a hazard, and then arriving at the space in front of the individuals. Now, my contention with that is there is a chance of failure. Okay, PC wants to dive roll across table, fails die roll. Sup, Jenny? Wants to make die roll and land in front of bad guys. My contention is if they fail, character doesn't get to make whatever the move action is. But if they succeed, they gain no more positive benefit than the PC who decided to not engage with your setting and your environment. So I know that sounds like a strange description, but sometimes there's a good reason for having a triangular mechanic and a bad reason for having triangular mechanics. And my default for that is that if someone is going to make a triangular mechanic, whether they've distracted themselves, whether they are trying to come around a corner, whether they are trying to use some skill to aim at something, or they are trying to gain some sort of advantage, or they are engaging, you have set up a situation in which the setting allows them to engage in it in a very rule of cool cinematic type of thing, and everyone has agreed that this is the type of game that they want. Zevron says, what denotes a triangular mechanic? For me, a triangular mechanic would be needing to take an action or engage the mechanics to achieve a secondary result when you don't need to do that particular result to get to where you want to go. So an example would be two PCs are firing at an enemy. Let's say they have bow and arrows, they're throwing spears, they are using, I don't know, gamma ray rifles or whatever the case might be, rail guns or something. One PC says, I'm going to roll my dice to hit the other person. So they roll the dice, they succeed or fail, and either they blow the head off of the bad guy or they don't. That's a direct A to B mechanic, right? Roll to attack, find out if you succeed or fail. A triangular mechanic for that would be, I'm going to to either delay my action or something to aim so that I can take a called shot. So a called shot would be a triangular mechanic. I am trying to achieve a greater result, but in order for me to do that, I have to go into this other to move to a secondary position, which might be either taking a resource, spending a resource, making a die roll, spending and a resource could be anything from spending a character resource, like I have so many points to spend, or spending a resource could be a time factor, right? I'm going to act last in the round. Spending a resource could be I have 2 actions to take. I'm going to spend one of those actions to aim so that I can take a called shot, and then engaging in the mechanic. Now I know it sounds like I'm going like, where the hell's DBJ going with this idea? But the end result is that the one person takes a snapshot, boom, they fire their pistol, they fire their arrow, they use their crossbow, and they just, hey, I'm going to roll to attack, boom, they hit. The other mechanic is I'm going to gain, would be in Dungeons and Dragons, I'm going to gain an advantage, let's say, on my attack action, and the GM or DM says, oh, well, if you delay your attack to, let's say, and this is coming off the top of my head, they either use their bonus action to gain an advantage on the attack, or the GM says, you know what, I'll let you do it since I know you're laying in wait, but you're going to have to delay your initiative order to the very end, or whatever the case may be, to gain a benefit to, say, snipe the individual in the ankle or shoot the crossbow bolt into their shoulder to make them drop their weapon or something like that. Now, in that case, the GM is not punishing them because, hey, they are spending a resource. Maybe the GM says, make an investigation check or a perception check to time the attack or whatever the case may be. They're giving them a cost in it. Maybe they're spending a bonus action or whatever. And then at the very end of it, they're getting a benefit. They get enemy gets shot in the shoulder, they drop their sword. Enemy gets shot in the ankle and they trip and fall, or it reduces their movement or something like that, right? So Zeb says, I thought we were going to bring up flight combat because the world of D&D is non-Euclidean. He just used the longest angle. Yeah, yes, absolutely. It's pretty highly specific, but that's what we do here. It's exactly what we do. Alley says, PC jumps on table and the tabletop comes loose and the PC busts their ass on the tabletop. Itself flips up and said, bad guy wasn't expecting. Got hit by a tabletop and PC is sitting on their ass. Looks around and says, I meant to do that. Indirect use of the environment. Especially if the DM is like, yeah, just make a roll, and they roll a 20, or maybe they roll a 1 and a 20. They crit fumble or something. Now, so okay, so why the specificity of triangular gaming mechanics? Well, okay, so all right, so like Plura says, would we be talking about shoving someone into a pool of acid as opposed to just punching them? Yes. So my reason for bringing up triangular mechanics is the fact that the more we expect players to like expend resources, and mind you, this is not a problem for doing so. We're expecting them to make die rolls. We have a greater chance of asking them to fail. So making 5 or 10 or 15 climbing checks to climb a mountain, the expectation is that one of those die rolls just might fail. So if there's going to be greater chances of failure, then what benefit are you giving the PCs for engaging in being distracted from what they're doing, right? So, and when I say distracted, it's what ends up happening in a lot of role-playing games is that players like to spam certain things. I'm going to attack with my Eldritch Blast. I'm going to shoot it with my laser rifle. I'm going to punch it in the face. And without any options, without any benefit on the tail end of using a triangular mechanic, then your players are probably not going to want to engage in those things. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is it's very difficult to find out if the game mechanics of a particular game system work to your advantage or not when doing it. For an example, let me give you an example. The game Fate uses a thing called aspects, and essentially aspects basically give you a +2 bonus. That's what it is. You can label the aspects all you want, but they basically give you a bonus in the action. And Fate encourages you. As a matter of fact, Fate pretty much demands that you start grabbing at the situational modifiers to achieve a greater result. So the flipping across the table and pushing someone into acid and swinging on the chandelier is almost demanded of your interaction with Fate, as opposed to, say, classic Dungeons and Dragons, which is you're more or less expected to be punished for engaging secondary elements in the setting, as opposed to just going straight ahead and hitting it with your sword. And trying to find the right balance of what you're looking for. For me, I'm a very cinematic individual and very visual. And so PCs rolling across tables and swinging on chandeliers and dangling off of rope bridges and things of that nature are, I want that to be encouraged and to not have it punished. But at the same time, sometimes you don't want to give those things away for free because they can be a little bit abused by player characters. Then on the other hand, there are some games that absolutely enforce it, like Fate, which after a while tends to rub me the wrong way because it's too mechanized when it comes to its descriptive labeling, its descriptive elements. And so finding that right balance is pretty difficult. And sometimes it's that session zero thing about how you're going to run the game and what you expect from the players. Going into the chat, I know this one isn't as flavorful. Today's episode won't be as flavorful as I would like, but I think we can pull something out of it, because already my brain is like churning over some situations and things we can talk about. Plus, there's a little bit of a segue because I think there's something else we can hit onto when it comes to triangular mechanics. Zev says roll for Dex to jump on table. Rolls 19. Congrats, you jumped on the table gracefully. Now roll to see how heavy you are. 2. You shattered the table because the extra helping of sweet rolls you had in town. Yeah, you don't want to do that to somebody because that's basically telling PCs like, yeah, go ahead and engage in the setting. I'm going to make sure it works against you. Plur says, righto, in Divinity, which I've been playing, the PC game, the environment gives a lot of benefits using fire surfaces, getting high ground, and so on. It's worth the extra resources. Plurus continues on and says, in a lot of games, it's just flavor and mechanically a poor choice. That's kind of where I'm heading at, right? Although this tends to involve the environment, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be the environment. For example, the classic in Dungeons and Dragons, making someone trip and fall, either shoving them down or shoving them 5 feet, making them fall prone or pushing them 5 feet, is a less optimal choice than it would be to hit them twice, instead of taking one action to make them fall and another action to strike them. Now, situationally, this person could be surrounded by your allies, right? I'm taking an action to make this person trip and fall, and then 2 other allies strike them with an advantage to hit them while they're down, or might make the contention that if you're going to shove somebody 5 feet backwards, if you shove them 5 feet over a cliff edge or into a pool of acid or into a spiked wall or into the undead creatures that are behind the cage and shove them into their grasping arms or something, I think that that flavor allows someone to do it. But if someone's on a flat plane and they're fighting an enemy, it it goes to show, do the mechanics allow you to blind a person, trip and fall them, stun them, disarm them, or something of that nature? Grappling is another thing, is one of those triangular mechanics can be problematic and make people not want to engage in them. So depending on how you and your players are at your table, you could smooth some of those mechanics out, make them easier to use. Sometimes some mechanics demand that you engage with certain parts of the game, so you might want to smooth them out, whether it's ranged combat or melee combat or something of that nature. And a lot of this we're talking about does have to do with physical combat, but social conflict has a lot to do with this as well. Mentioned yesterday about gaining leverage on someone to use your charisma against them. Someone might say, well, if I make a charisma check, I could just charisma diplomance my way through this adventure, as opposed to worrying about the success or failure of hitting people with my sword, right? Yeah. Zev says, you start stacking barrels in Divinity 2 and begin combat by throwing oil barrels on enemies from high ground, and then having your rogue with high initiative throw a fire spell or fire bomb down on them. I see. I love that kind of stuff. Haven't had to think this hard in combat since Total War. But the payoff is great, right? You expend the time and energy to do this thing by stacking barrels of flammable oil, and have someone knock them down, and then someone else fires a flaming arrow or uses a fire spell or maybe a blowtorch or something to set everything on fire, right? So there is a cost benefits analysis to that, and which might make some PCs go, players are like, that's actually kind of a cool thing, and when we like to use, what's the gaming terminology, rules as written, right? Raw versus rules as intended, which would be rye. And when someone says rules as written, while it's not a problem to use rules as written, it expects you to engage. It gives you rules on how you are to interact with the world. Much like the complaint about falling from a tall height, and that you can only fall when you reach terminal velocity in Dungeons and Dragons. You take 20 die 6 damage. Well, that may not kill your character, so people go, Ray? RAI is pronounced like Ray. Okay, I'll give it to you. But some people are like, well, that doesn't make any sense, that you could hit terminal velocity, slam into the ground, and still live, but the rules dictate otherwise, right? That is the truism of the gaming world. So how do we explain it? How do we embrace it? Now, for me, I don't have a problem with it, because my cinematic brain wraps around it. But those are the rules of the world. If you want to change those rules of the world to achieve more of a grittier effect or something like that, again, that just depends on, it depends on how you wrap your brain around it. Yeah. Blur says, well, with a chandelier, a success, say on the acrobatics check, etc., would give advantage or whatever on the attack. A fail moves you with no benefit, and a bad fail, a bad roll, a bad failed roll, you fall. Which, excuse me. There's a lot of benefit. It makes it cool, but there's an element of risk in there as well. Push numbers up or down for flavor. Yeah, and that's my contention, right? Like, if a player says they want to do something that's it sounds dangerous on the surface, but the net result is, hey, I want to do this cool thing and achieve this advantage, then having some sort of cost effect, right? Oh, well, maybe I will give my player this advantage on it, but you're going to have to expend some resource. That resource may be as simple as making a die roll, right? That is that is a cost expenditure. That is part of the triangle. Hey, I want to surprise the enemy, or I want to make a move that allows me to cross a distance, or swing on the chandelier and go over the top of the heads of the bad guys. I want to roll across the table, or I want to flip the table over and use it as cover or something like that. And, are you expecting a die roll every time they do these kind of things? Do you allow them to use part of their movement? All of these things have a cost to it, or you can establish a cost to it, and then just give them, if they succeed, give them some kind of benefit. Now, I know on the other hand, what I'm talking about when it comes to flipping a table for cover, swinging on a chandelier to gain, or making a back roll, backflip or shoulder roll across the table or something, sounds like, I can hear some people going, DVJ, sounds like you're kind of breaking the rules. You're allowing people to make moves that they're not allowed to. You're giving them benefits that may supersede or give them some kind of gaming benefit that doesn't fit into their character type or something. And so my contention would be that yes, but only in limited set of circumstances, right? Unless there's a chandelier floating over top of the PC's head that always allows them to swing on it to gain this extra movement, or not allow them to waste an action or give them a bonus to attack PCs. They're always going to be someplace different. Maybe one day they get to swing on the chandelier, and then in the next 10 minutes, they're running down a dark alley. Well, there is no chandelier. You know what I mean? Ali, who says, okay, roll the 20d6 when you hit the ground after gaining a velocity player. Players like, I live. Yeah. GM's like, nope, that's how many fragments of shattered bones you have. Now, here's the weird thing. There have been people who've jumped out of planes, parachutes haven't opened, and they've lived with a lot of pain and and shattered bones, but there have been people who've lived. There have been people who've gotten, spikes and knives and shoved into their brains and walked into emergency rooms. Is that the norm? I don't think so, but it would be kind of weird to do that. Oh man. Zev says to give context, wizards in Divinity are super strong because they have lots of crowd control effects, like setting the entire field on fire, which doesn't go away after combat, or putting flames out with rain spells, or transforming enemies into animals, or social combat. Yeah, and I have zero problem with people trying to like control a battlefield, whether it's spilling down flaming oil, or leading enemies away, using their charisma to lead enemies away, which is, I'm going to segue a little bit into using other skills in combat, or using other skills and effects in locations in which it doesn't apply. So using combat skills in social encounters, using social or combat in exploration, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to get into that as well. Hey, Scott. Zephyr says the power of crowd control is also double-edged because the fire doesn't care who starts it. It'll damage everyone, and melee fighters suffer because they have to run through it, which is another effect too, where someone, like, for example, I talked about Aftermath at one point, well in the past or something, someone casts a bolt of fire out of their hand and they make a die roll to strike their enemy. What happens to that fire when they miss, right? So, what do they start a forest fire? Do they light the tavern on fire? Does the flame strike some errant barrel of oil because they've been in this warehouse, and then it lights things on fire? And now the PCs and the NPCs have to fire through, make attacks through the fire, jump through the fire, push someone into the fire. For me, I'm like, yes, but are there rules for that? Not necessarily, but I think you can extrapolate rules from that. Zeb says, I remember a player wanted to use their cooking skill, choose cooking utensils as their tool skill. Okay, they chose it to hide poisons for targets. I made them roll. If they hit the DC, it hides in the food. in the food on a +5 roll. I like that. I like that idea. And I think you're pointing on something there, Zev. Zev goes on to say, you can't detect it. It tastes heavenly. On a fail, it just ruins the food. I like the idea of using that because someone is using those so-called useless skills or dump skills, and in a situation in which it does count for them using it, maybe to, like you said, using a cooking skill to hide a poison inside of it. Whereas someone might think that, well, you only have to have the poisoner skill to use a poison in food, but maybe, yes, you can concoct poisons if you're a poisoner or you have a poisoner's toolkit, but hiding it so they don't taste it in their food or in the wine or something might take somebody with a little bit more skill to do that. So yes, very much so. Pelora says, using social in combat, I understand, such as deception for feints, intimidation, and so on. Can't see much in the way of combat in a social setting. Sword tricks, I don't know. Oh, so let's jump down that rabbit hole, right? Using divergent skills in a situation which it doesn't count, right? Okay, so all right, so using, say, combat skills in like social interactions or in exploration. For exploration, I think it very much matters if you're trying to harm or damage materials around you. So cutting ropes on rope bridges, striking things to make them fall down. Maybe there's those barrels of oil are balanced precariously up on, stack 3 to 5 high in the warehouse, and the barbarian wants to come by and smash their axe against the bottom to make the top fall. I could see something like that being used. Maybe it's not necessarily a specified skill, although you could do something like acrobatics or a strength check, maybe. Maybe even sleight of hand could be used to try to knock over or balance something precariously so that maybe an enemy comes by and knocks it down. I had a player take a bucket of tar. What's the stuff? Anyway, they used a bucket of tar. It was used to prevent sieges in castles. You pour it down murder holes on top of people trying to besiege the boiling oil and things like that. Yeah, and a PC wanted to get a bucket, open up a doorway, balance it on top of the door, and balance it against the door frame, so that when an enemy busted through the door, the bucket would flip over and dump on top of their heads. And I was like, I hadn't thought about that, but I like it. Doing things like that very much work. Zev goes on to say, the only thing I can think of is Pelora is using torture for interrogation, but I know not all parties are okay with that. Yeah, that's those lines and veils kind of thing. Yeah. For another way would be using social interactions in combat would be very much using distractions, right? A large number of enemies are coming after your allies. One ally says, hey, I'm going to lead them down a narrow valley or something to trap them in, and maybe someone makes a lot of noise or threatens the people or makes fun of them, maybe using like performance to act silly, or intimidation to threaten them, or deception to make someone feel like pretending you're dead, or pretending that you are a helpless victim to have, say, enemies go after the weakest member of the party, or making a sound, maybe like using your voice to throw your voice to make it sound like you are a victim that they can go after, and that might split the enemies or make the enemies decide, instead of going after the people armed with heavy weapons, to go after the helpless victim that's down the dark alley or the narrow passage or something like that, right? So the idea would be using some of the social methods to possibly get some sort of advantage, or have have the enemy act in a way that would most benefit the person attacking them, much like having something fall on someone's head, but you distract them so they don't look up in the air or they don't listen to what's behind them, or the halfling that kneels down like a behind someone's knees and have someone kick them and have them fall over. Right? It's not noticing what's going on, and I think you could get away with that. Also, when it comes to having a chase in a city when you have lots of people around, um, socially navigating through a physical hazard, it most applies to navigating through crowds, right? Whether you are using intimidation to get a crowd to move out the way, whether you're using some form of persuasion or diplomacy to forcefully move your way through the crowd, but apologize to people because you're doing it, or maybe even performance to get a crowd to look in one direction while someone else picks pockets or something like that. I could see that happening as well. Or doing the run in through a crowd and then yelling out fire, or yelling out to the enemies that are chasing you that they need to be stopped. Everyone yells out, "Stop that person! They stole a purse," or something else, right? Um, uh, Zev says, I remember my best friend, the mad lad, went up to the bandit keep as a rogue, and instead of lockpicking, he just knocked. The bandits were shocked because no one ever knocks on the door. So the man opened up and it got the job done. And that is a that is a thing, even without a die roll, right? If your players are like, you know what, I'm just going to knock on the front door. And like you said, the players are like, wait, what? And so instinctively, they, expecting an attack, they're prepared for the attack. But when someone knocks on the front door, they just open it up. Hell yeah. Does that constitute a surprise attack by knocking on the door and having them open it up, thinking that like someone's delivering a pizza to them or something? Hell yeah. I absolutely think that. Now, there are other things we can do as well. Like, for example, having people use certain skills in a way that seems so that some of our skills don't become useless. We even joked about going into a world in which you're going into the human body and making a medicine check to navigate your way through the bloodstream or into the brain, or trying to prevent yourself getting sucked down into the lungs or not getting crushed by the heart valves or something. I could see that's an extreme descriptor of using medicine check to navigate through a 50-mile biological body, but I think it works, right? Maybe using other skills in ways in which we're not normally used to using them. Like, we often talk about making perception checks, but maybe some of these checks maybe fall more in line into, say, history or investigation. So a perception check may make you notice something very simple, whereas an investigation check or an insight check, investigation would be like non-living, where an insight lets you notice more human behavior. And maybe that allows the PCs to find out, oh, the hobgoblin chieftain is in control, but these 5 over here on the left don't look like they're too enthused to engage in this fight. Maybe I can convince them to run or scare them away or distract them with gold, or maybe they look like they're a little bit easier to intimidate. Maybe even having a sword fight with someone, with a big bad, maybe an investigation or an insight check might allow you to find out that they favor their left side, and I bet I can convince this person to follow me, and there's a open pit or something, and I could distract them enough to have them fall into the pit, or not necessarily using, like, say, a vicious mockery spell, but you could viciously mock someone to get them so angry that they fall headlong into I don't know, a boiling vat of acid or something of that nature. Excuse me. Wow. Uh, Zev goes on to say, a way to employ this in charisma checks is deception, trying not to deceive, trying to deceive an innkeeper that your name is Underhill instead of Baggins may not pass the DC, but if you only miss by a few, they may just overlook it. Many people have reasons to hide their identity while being legitimate. Just watched Fellowship of the Ring last night, so that's why I used it. You're fine. Now, we brought up using charisma and how charisma isn't an on-off switch. It's not mind control. And like you said, hell, the television show that's been on, Law and Order, I don't know how many years it was on, 17 years, 22 years, who the hell knows, right? And there's even Law and Order SVU that's been on even longer. Much of that television show, between the music, the boom boom transition music, right, is detectives investigating a crime, and damn near everyone is lying because everyone has a reason to try to use their deception to avoid what they perceive as punishment from the detectives, right? The shopkeeper that they're trying to find out who robbed someone down the street, but the shopkeeper is, I don't know, selling illegal goods, ill-gotten goods or something. And the detectives are like, listen, there were 3 murders down the street. We're not really interested in your stolen eggs or something right now. We need to find out your cameras to find out who, went down the street. So charisma, people resisting charisma effects, or how long they last and how people are manipulated by them, could be, again, talking about the triangular thing. It could be, okay, I need to find out first why the shopkeeper is lying to me. And then once I find out why the shopkeeper is lying to me, then I can convince them to give me the recording from their cameras of what happened down the street, right? The shopkeeper's like, no, you need a warrant. I'm not giving you anything. I don't know why you're harassing me, whatever the case may be. And it could be any number of reasons why. So, we talked about the city guard not letting you pass into the city state, not getting in through the front doors. And instead of going from 0 to 60 and wanting to slit their throat, we talked about, the city guard having a gambling addiction, or being drunk, or being on a last chance before getting fired, or being bored, or being distracted, and for whatever the case may be. Now, segue. Scott says, what they don't show is when the detectives leave, they phone in the shopkeep so the other cops can go harass them. Yeah, no, we always dude. I was completely tangential in the beginning of this stream, so don't worry about it. Yeah, on a scale of 1 to 10, this stream's probably like a 2. but that is the case, right? Someone uses charisma to intimidate a guard or deceive a shopkeep or something like that. No one's to say that in the next 3 minutes they don't call the authorities or tell their best friend what happened, or seek to alert others about what had just happened to them, or feel upset that they were deceived, Thanks, Zeb. You're so silly. All right. So uh, I think something else that we can pull from, which I love, and I brought this up before, but I'll bring it up here again when it talks to triangles, is that when we are using some of our little mechanical features, and Zeb brought this up before about starting a fire, but you got to be careful because the fire doesn't care who started it. The fire is what it is. And it's just about consequences, consequences of actions. Someone fires their spell that blasts people, or someone spills oil on the ground, or an enemy falls down or something. When a PC kills the ogre and the ogre drops to the ground, the ogre's body is still there. Could someone use the ogre's body and hide behind it for cover? Maybe, sure. It's that errant burning hands or fireball spell that you use to kill the bad guys. Does it start a forest fire, or does it light the tavern on fire? Probably. You know, that grease spell that you wanted to cast on the ground, is it real grease? And if it is it slippery for everyone as everybody's trying to pass by it? Probably. I hear you, P. Like necromance up that ogre for round two. You know, heck yeah. Um, Zev says, "I'd love to see how we go about world building around triangle mechanics." Yeah, we're going to talk about that too, right? There's maybe you want to in your world or your setting, you there's something cool but unique in your world in terms of how things are done. For example, there may be certain types of herbs or poisons that benefit people if they use them, much like sympathetic magic, right? If I have a lock of hair or a drop of blood from my enemy, does my spell work better against them? Sure, you know, my strength. Can I have a spell that increases my strength if I collect some ogre's blood or something like that, right? Yeah, I could see that. You know, oh man, oh wow, it's very foggy. Where the hell are you? It's so misty, I can't see past 12 feet. So, hey, don't talk about my environment. That's for Thursday, man. Oh, Wisconsin. Okay. Oh, you're getting the probably getting moisture and lake effect fog because we I'm a little bit south of the Great Lakes, but yeah. The backlands of Canada. Yeah, basically fog is a cloud on the ground, and if you live near the great near live close enough to a very large watery source, you'll get that. And those of us in the upper reaches of the state get a lot of that, where we get some nor'easter from Canada, from the north. We get wind patterns and weather patterns, and we get a lot of fog too. Fog, rain, snow. But also, I'm going to end the stream on this strangely odd triangular mechanic that I think is brilliant in the way it is utilized, but very strange because it means we have to step out of ourselves to think about it. Plur says, when I was applying the triangle rule in my prep yesterday, I ended up with more of a web of stuff than just individual strings to the point of creating new NPCs and so on. Yeah, I should have put a warning label, maybe. but you get the point though, P. I'm sure you were having. I know you're being a little bit sarcastic, unless you're not. You've got your middle finger up, which I don't know, kind of the same thing. But yeah, maybe we put a little warning label on that. Yeah, Zev says, I've had snow in July here. It's odd. You're in Wisconsin, dude. It's either snow, your season is snow and everything else. It's okay if you can complain. I don't care. I can take it. Really, Dead Man? No, Dead Man talks about falling from a height that 20d6, the odds are suffering 70 points of damage, as opposed to 10d10, which the odds are about 55 points of damage. Yeah. I need that as a t-shirt, Zev. Warning, may squirrel you down a pit of connections and plots unforeseen and out of control. I can't say it any faster than that, but you have to have it like really fast at the bottom with like the little ticker going by down under the bottom of the screen. Plur says, then I spent 2 hours on music, which always happens when I'm writing new locations. I love music. I love music and sound effects too, in the background. Okay, so there is a mechanic that is used in Blades in the Dark. I know I've brought up Blades in the Dark before. I believe there's another game based on the television show called Leverage, which is a flashback mechanic. Now, in short, it is a mechanic that allows someone to it circumvents the analysis paralysis when players are trying to plan out a heist. So instead of them spending 3 hours of your 4-hour gaming session planning on a heist, this allows them to just go into the heist and then make die rolls based on their skills to say that something has happened because they've already said it happened. An example would be um player character walks into secure location and doesn't have any weapons, right? And because there are guards that are going to check them for weapons. And when they go into secure location, PC says, I'm going to go into the rest area, look behind, I don't know, look behind the countertop or go into the closet and pull out my weapons. Now, they haven't said this prior to this interaction, right? All PCs walk into secure location and they don't have any weapons on them. And how the flashback mechanic works is that you segue slightly away from the main action. PC holds up their hands. They don't have any weapons. They say, hold on, excuse me. I need to use the restroom. They go into the restroom, look behind the pedestal. They look behind the crapper and they pull out their weapons. Okay. Or they go into the closet, or a servant that works there gives them a wink or a nod or passes them a note to let them know that their stuff, their weapons and armor or whatever they're using for whatever attack is about to happen, has been stashed away for them. So what they do is the game mechanic allows you to make, say, a charisma roll or one or two interaction rolls, and you play out the flashback very, very quickly, almost like as fast as combat would happen, right? Oh, I'm going to say that I spoke to a servant to stash my weapons away. Great. Here's the difficulty. You make the roll. Boom. You play it out a little bit. I'm going to pass 3 hours earlier. I passed, a day earlier or whatever. I talked to one of the servants, and I know the mom, so I passed him some coins so that he could pay for, I don't know, lung treatments for the mom and go to the apothecary to treat her. And he doesn't like the dictator that lives in this secure location anyway. So sneaking my weapons in isn't a big deal, right? And so you guys are silly. And that is a way of using mechanics, strangely enough, mechanics to allow the PCs to achieve a benefit in a situation or change the setting in a way by using it as a flashback. Now, of course, you can't do that all the time. Maybe if you're not using Blades in the Dark, of course, maybe you have some kind of like, I want to spend inspiration to do this thing. Like, I want to spend inspiration to say that one of the servants left the back door unlocked, right? I would allow somebody to do that. Or is it possible that before this happened that I intimidated one of the guards to allow me to bring my stuff in by making them think that I'm an undercover investigator or something like that. You guys, so it says, if your loved one has been squirreled using our mechanic, call 1-800-OUR-BAD. That's 1-800-OUR-BAD. You may be entitled to a settlement and apology. Yeah. And a complimentary carton of almond milk. Tesla Ranger says, this is a squirrel-free work environment. 0 days without incident. That would be kind of cute to have behind me, like one of those little placards, so you flip the number over and stuff. Be kind of silly. So long as the situation in which the PC finds themselves could be reasonably predicted beforehand, I think it's reasonable. And it's, now, mind you, I don't think a mechanic like that. I'm with you, Dead Man. Yeah, I loved super vanilla almond milk. The unsweetened stuff, I think it's best for like cereals and coffees, teas. Scott poses, I like when the thief pulls out some odd but mundane item, which is perfect to circumvent some high-tech security. Like gum and bobby pins come to mind. I saw in a movie, someone wanted to clear a building out of individuals. So they walked into the building, they had a lighter and a cigarette. They lit the cigarette, took just one little puff, lit it. set the cigarette on the edge of a lamp. What are those, like hallway lamps with the little light, the sconce, basically. And then the cigarette, the cigarette was attached to, stuck inside of matches. So the end of the end of the cigarette was stuck, put inside of the match, and then set it inside of a sconce. So eventually the cigarette burns the matches, and it went to the sconce, and then it caused the fire alarms to go off and the sprinklers. Hey babe, love you. Bye. That was the heraldrics. We've come to the hour mark. Guys, thank you for putting up with this. Sometimes we don't have the best episodes, and I'm not at my best today, but I think much I'm going to go into the Discord as we speak. Strangely enough, I'm off today. Before I go, I will do this. This is, since I squirreled anyway, I'm going to give you a little bit of a tour behind me. I'm sure a lot of you can see what the hell's going on. So let's see. That's my Force Be With You pillow. That's my Wonder Woman. That is Wonder Woman material that was made as a curtain to block out most of the sunlight, because that window gets a lot of sun, which ends up ruining the whiting out the TV. So did that. And then of course over here we have Doctor Strange right here. Purchased this at a local comic and gaming store. You can't really zoom in on it, but that is not Iron Man. That is War Machine. And then of course we have the Avengers. That's a print I got at a fair, but it's like a photorealistic print kind of. And then right here is a collector's item for the X-Men. That's Darth Vader. These are Star Wars movies. This is a collage of DC comics. It's like all the main DC heroes, like your top 8 DC heroes. So it's like a big collage of the covers of a lot of comics, and they're really tiny. Those are my movie pillows and stuff. And then right here, up there's Marilyn Monroe. Over here's James Dean. You can't see right here. Normally I have a cover behind me, and they actually sit behind my television. And then my extra special thing right here is that is Stan Lee, and it's a signed photo. It's a photograph of Stan Lee, and it's been signed over to me. And that was a gift given to me when he was at a comic convention here in Ohio. So I really love it. Anyway, guys, have a great one. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.